I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it. Never revisited Snow White again.
It's just like getting to work through the terrifying trauma that I had from watching the original cartoon every day on set.
They were terrifying.
Disney cartoons were so scary back then.
I don't know about you as a little girl, but when I was a little girl, Snow White scared me to death.
I know.
Snow White is the girl you remember, but she's definitely made for the modern age.
And it's more of a 2022 version of Snow White. What did you mean by that?
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937. She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
How do you put a modern spin on it but still pay homage to the original?
Respect and keep all the iconic, magical, delicious moments.
You two clearly get along and respect and love
I
each
have
other.
no idea what you're talking about.
Hater.
And everything was very dark.
Yes!
It was delicious. I loved it.
The lead up to Disney's live action Snow White premiere has just been insane. If Disney was looking to limit controversy surrounding this film, then they really aren't doing a very good job. Because the last time I made a video on Disney Snow White, it was that Disney was canceling the UK Snow White premiere amid backlash and fears of negative Rachel Zegler press, and they'll limit her to tightly controlled press events. And that's pretty much what we saw when Rachel Zegler went to Japan solo to promote Snow White. She sang Waiting on a Wish alongside the voice actress that plays the Japanese version of Snow White. So we kind of saw like this really tightly controlled media tour in Japan. Rachel Zegler even went on a show called Day Day, and there weren't really any questions. She was just told to taste apples.
That is very delicious. There's going to be so many stories that come from the set about how difficult I am to work with simply because I don't want apples.
And on this news program, Day Day, she also sang Waiting on a Wish. So it's been pretty controlled as far as like Rachel Zegler and the press. Disney put Snow White tickets on sale 10 days before the release, and it's not looking good. Disney Springs AMC dedicates minimal screens to Rachel Zegler's release. Usually at Disney Springs, when these movies release, they have multiple screenings because this is Disney Springs. This is Disney's own backyard, and they're having trouble selling tickets that they need to limit the screens.
I don't need your business. Thanks.
Disney Springs, Orlando, Florida, a theater where Disney traditionally pulls out all the stops for major releases. Normally, for a high-profile Disney film, multiple screens are dedicated to its debut, including both the standard and dine-in theaters. However, an analysis of the Snow White preview and opening night showtime suggests Disney isn't expecting a strong turnout. The film has only been assigned the Dolby Theater, 2 standard screens, and 1 dine-in theater.
Why are you the way that you are? Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way.
Now, I don't know if you guys have been to Disney Springs and been to that AMC theater, but that theater is pretty big. And usually when it's a Disney release, it is marketed everywhere at Disney Springs, and it is such a huge spectacle at the theater. They pretty much put all of the films that have been in the theater on like the smaller screens, and almost every single screen is the new Disney movie, but it's not happening here. It says that the limited rollout for Snow White suggests Disney is keeping expectations low, even in one of its most heavily attended locations. And now we get the news that Disney scales back Snow White's Hollywood premiere amid Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot controversies.
Seriously? Come on!
Nope.
So when I had reported that the UK was canceling their premiere, now they're doing something with Rachel Zegler at a castle in Spain, but at least we will get one red carpet in Hollywood, and Gal Gadot, Rachel Zegler, and Andrew Burnap, who plays Jonathan, the prince in the new Snow White live action, were scheduled to be there. They're supposed to, all 3 of them, be there on the red carpet in Hollywood. But even now, they're scaling that back. Disney is hosting a Hollywood premiere of Snow White on March 15th, but the studio won't be rolling out a robust red carpet like it usually does. That sounds like they are scaling everything back. No UK premiere. Extremely controlled press junkets, and I wouldn't even call this a press junket, honestly. Disney is really pulling back on the premiere of this film.
Considerable margin, and
the red carpet will not include the dozens of media outlets usually invited by Disney to interview the cast and creatives at its premiere. Instead, coverage will be limited to photographers and house crew.
Wait, what?
It sounds like this premiere is going to be exactly like the one that we saw in Japan. It's just going to be a lot of photo ops, possibly a performance, and that's it. I do not think that this premiere is going to be like any premiere that we've ever seen. Now, this article was written by my favorite Variety interviewer, Mark Malkin.
The gayest, the gayest, the gayest is the gayest. They get gayer and gayer as each episode goes.
Which is this guy right here. The person whose interview practically kicked off all of this controversy with Rachel Zegler.
Crying on that stage.
When am I not crying?
What was it like seeing yourself for the first time in full Snow White drag?
I love that description. It's perfect.
And of course, he had to label fans of Disney as toxic. Now, what's interesting in this article is that he starts talking about the world politics that have also come into play. And That Park Place wrote a very interesting article about Variety's attempted narrative shift. In his article, Mark Malkin wrote, "World politics have also come into play. Zegler has promoted Free Palestine on social media. At the same time, Gadot, who is Israeli, has become an outspoken supporter of Israel on social media, as well as in a passionate speech she delivered on March 4th when she was honored at the Anti-Defamation League's annual summit in New York City." Now, what's interesting here that they talk about is the framing. This framing is deliberate instead of keeping the focus on Zegler's self-inflicted controversies.
I'm a narcissist.
Variety introduces Gadot through Malkin, as if her speech at a formal ADL event somehow plays a role in Snow White's struggles. And it doesn't. Gal Gadot has never really tied Snow White to any of her political views or ideological views or anything like that. She's never done that. So why this narrative shift in media? I'm also noticing it in press interviews with Gal Gadot. Because Rachel Zegler is currently on her way to Spain to promote Snow White, Gal Gadot is actually on talk shows, sitting down with talk show hosts, talking about Snow White, and the questions that she gets asked and the topics that are being introduced sound extremely familiar. Here, she's on Good Morning America, and let's listen to the very first question that she is asked.
So how do you put a modern spin on it but still pay homage to the original?
Well, isn't that interesting? How do you put a modern spin on it but still pay homage to the original? That was one of the questions that Rachel Zegler was asked that got her into all of that controversy.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage.
Let's listen to Gal Gadot's answer, though.
You bring someone brilliant like Mark Webb, our director, who managed to kind of pay respect and keep all the iconic, magical, delicious moments and the songs and all the magical creatures and everybody, and kind of adapt it in a way to make it timeless and contemporary at the same time.
Yeah, and it is.
That is a great answer, even though we know that it's not going to be like the original Snow White movie, but that is a great answer that she gave. It's better than what Rachel Zegler gave back at D23.
Weird.
Gal Gadot is really focusing on the iconography, the imagery, and that's pretty much Disney's marketing right now as well. All of their marketing for Snow White is dealing with the imagery of Snow White. And while they have all of that imagery, it's not going to be the same story. It's interesting that they're focusing on the imagery and not the story. It's a great answer because that's all the marketing is. But it's interesting to me that they asked her that question, that controversial question that got Rachel Zegler in trouble in the first place. She talks about the same thing in this interview on Live with Kelly and Mark. But what's interesting to me is how they begin the conversation. Listen to this.
Classic story. I don't know about you as a little girl, but when I was a little girl, Snow White, the fairy tale, scared me to death.
I know. There was something so dark about being so little and watching the 1937 original.
Right, of course, yeah.
Where have we heard that before?
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again.
Let's listen to the rest of what Gal Gadot says.
We had the VHS, and we didn't have many back in my days. We didn't have many, so that was like something that I watched quite often as a girl. But I used to love it. I love the music and the poison. Like, I love it's so timeless in a way.
They start off saying that like it is scary, but I watched it so many times and I loved it. So they're trying to change the narrative around what Rachel Zegler said before. It is very interesting that the media are framing their questions this way, with Gal Gadot trying to shift the narrative. But it makes me wonder, because these interviews are supposed to be like really controlled with almost pre-approved questions, I'm wondering if Disney wants them to frame it this way. Let's have a different take. Instead of Rachel Zegler's take, let's have someone else's take on, is Snow White scary? Or on a different take on the modern updated version of this new Snow White movie. Because Gal Gadot, she went on 3 interviews. The last one she did was Jimmy Fallon. And on Jimmy Fallon, there really wasn't anything super controversial or really familiar either. She basically discussed what it was like playing the evil queen, what her daughters thought about it. She advocated for people's health. And the only different thing that she did on Jimmy Fallon was she showed them a clip from the new Snow White movie. Another thing that was very interesting to me about these 3 interviews with Gal Gadot is nobody asked her what it was like to work with Rachel Zegler.
I mean, this girl is a whole...
Usually that is a huge question, especially since she is your co-star. She is playing opposite you. You are the evil queen. She is Snow White. But no one even brings up Rachel Zegler's name. That is wild to me. These 2 are playing 2 of the most iconic roles in Disney history, and they're not bringing up the actress who's playing Snow White. I really think in Disney's attempt to do this, to really rein in that negative press, they're kind of creating even more. So they're sort of shooting themselves in the foot. But from start to finish, Snow White has been surrounded in controversy, so like that doesn't really surprise me. But anyways, guys, that's it for me. Let me know what you guys think in those comments down below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.